They say fear saves lives. They say the brain is designed for survival. They say instincts will kick in when everything collapses. But they are wrong, because when the fire breaks out, when the water surges, when the sky turns black and the ground begins to move, the brain does not always become your ally. Sometimes it becomes your greatest threat, not because it lacks power, but because it hesitates, because it freezes. And in that moment, the 1 second that divides life from death, hesitation is fatal. This is the silent killer of our modern age, not the earthquake, not the flood, not the collapse. It's the mind, frozen, trapped, staring at the oncoming storm, not running, not reacting, not even screaming, just stuck. You see, the ancient brain is a masterpiece forged in fire, evolved through famine, sharpened through survival, but it is still, at its core, a cautious machine. It fears making the wrong move more than it fears not moving at all. It prioritizes social cues over sirens. It scans for permission before it acts. It looks around the room instead of out the window. And when disaster strikes, when moments matter more than minutes, the ancient brain can lock up, lock down, and watch the moment pass into catastrophe. This is not weakness. It is programming. And programming can be overwritten, but not by chance, not by luck, only by choice. Thomas Edison said, "The value of an idea lies in the using of it." In disaster, the value of knowledge lies in your readiness to act on it before your brain has time to doubt it, because your instinct is not to run. Your instinct is to freeze, to look for context, to scan for permission. That's not instinct, that's delay. And in the chaos of disaster, delay is death dressed in silence. Understand this. The brain is not the hero in survival. It is the battleground. Your mind will try to convince you the smoke isn't dangerous, that the noise isn't real, that someone else will do something. It will invent comfort in the face of collapse, because the mind does not seek truth in crisis. It seeks refuge. And so, you must train it to run toward truth, to obey preparation, not panic, to move before permission is granted. This is where purpose becomes a weapon, where discipline becomes armor. The Navy SEALs say, "You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training." And in disasters, most people fall to zero because they never train their minds to push through the freeze. They train their minds to stay comfortable, to obey authority, to wait for instructions. But the fire doesn't wait for instructions. The water doesn't pause for clarity. The earth does not explain itself. If you want to survive, you must reprogram your first reaction from freeze to move, from analyze to act, from panic to purpose. That does not begin in crisis. That begins today, in the ordinary, in the routine. When you hear the alarm, do you flinch or freeze? When someone shouts, "Run," do you question or move? Every moment you hesitate in daily life, your brain learns one thing: pause. And that pause becomes permanent under pressure. So you must make decisiveness your baseline, clarity your habit, action your identity. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." Your mind is your axe, and sharpening it is not a luxury. It is a responsibility. Because when disaster comes, and it always does, whether in nature or in life, you won't have time to think. You will only have time to trust, not in fate, not in luck, but in the training you gave your mind. And in that moment, your survival won't come from the brain. It will come from the blueprint you built for it. The world will always shake. The wind will always rise. The fire will always burn. The only question is, did you freeze or did you move? Because in disasters, as in life, those who survive are not the ones with the strongest instincts. They are the ones with the clearest disciplines, the fastest action, the deepest preparation, and most of all, the mind that refuses to freeze. That's not something you find, it's something you forge. Because you are not born to be passive. You are not crafted from centuries of survival just to hesitate when the moment demands movement. Inside you is the spark that built bridges, lit cities, broke records, and reshaped history. The same fire that turned cavemen into creators. That fire is not gone. It is only buried beneath comfort, beneath distraction, beneath the illusion of safety. But it can be reignited, and it must be, because disaster doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't wait for your schedule to clear or your courage to return. It kicks down the door at 2 a.m. without warning, without sympathy, without logic. It exposes your default. And most people's default is denial, not because they are weak, but because they've never been taught otherwise. They've been taught to seek consensus, to wait for someone to say, it's okay to move, to hesitate until the crowd panics, and by then, it's too late. Understand this truth. Your first move in crisis determines everything that follows, and that first move must come from clarity, not confusion. Clarity does not come from panic. It comes from vision. Henry Ford once said, "Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason so few engage in it. But I'll tell you what's harder than thinking. Thinking clearly when the building's on fire and no one else is moving. Clarity under chaos is the rarest trait of all. But it's not mythical. It is built. You build it the same way warriors build readiness, through exposure, through rehearsal, through choosing discomfort in peacetime so you can deliver decisiveness in chaos. Pilots rehearse engine failure. Soldiers rehearse ambushes. Firefighters rehearse collapse. What do you rehearse? Most people rehearse comfort. They practice hesitation by making excuses. They rehearse anxiety by reacting emotionally to every inconvenience. They repeat the script, "I'll wait and see. I'll deal with it if it happens." And then, when disaster arrives, they freeze, perfectly aligned with the habits they've lived every day. But there's another way, and it begins by asking yourself this question every day. If the power went out right now, what would I do? If a fire broke out in this room, where would I go? If the person next to me dropped unconscious, would I act or pause? You don't answer that with thoughts. You answer it with readiness. And readiness is not fear. It is awareness. It is the posture of someone who no longer needs a wake-up call to live awake. It is the mindset of those who understand that survival is not reaction. It is ritual, because the brain that freezes has not been trained for action. It's been trained for comfort, for waiting, for consensus, for safe thinking. But safe thinking is not safe living. Safe thinking is what made people stay in the Titanic's lounge long after it had struck the iceberg. Safe thinking is what made passengers on a burning plane fumble with overhead bins instead of running for the exit. Safe thinking is what makes you look around, not ahead. And you don't outrun a fire by looking around. You outrun it by seeing before others see, by acting before others react, by deciding before the brain catches up, because instinct is slow when it has never been challenged. You want instinct that's lightning fast? You must live like lightning. Not chaotic, but direct. Not frantic, but focused. Clarity is lightning. Purpose is lightning. When Walt Disney built Disneyland, everyone told him it was a fantasy, that nobody would want to visit a cartoon park in the middle of orange groves. But Walt wasn't waiting for the crowd to believe. He moved before belief was popular. He wasn't driven by noise. He was driven by inner necessity. And when disaster hits, inner necessity is all that saves you. The external world becomes chaos. The signals are scrambled. The leaders are uncertain. The directions conflict. If you have not built clarity inside, you will collapse with what's outside. But if your clarity is internal, immovable, unquestioned, you become unshakable. That's the power of purpose in disaster. And purpose is not a slogan. It's not a hashtag. It's not a poster on the wall of your office. It's a muscle. It's what makes the firefighter run into the smoke. It's what made Viktor Frankl find meaning inside a concentration camp. It's what makes parents shield their children without hesitation. Purpose cuts through freeze, because freeze is the symptom of disconnection from mission, from meaning, from the necessity to act. The antidote to freeze is not speed, it's depth. A deep reason to move is more powerful than a shallow instinct to pause. That's why your life must be more than comfort. It must be mission, and not just for the disasters on the news, but for the disasters in your own life. The breakups, the betrayals, the diagnoses, the layoffs, the losses that feel like earthquakes. They're all try. Because in every disaster, gaze on a personal or global, there are two kinds of people: those who freeze and those who move. Not the strongest, not the smartest, not the wealthiest, most educated, or best equipped. Those who move. The difference is microscopic, but monumental. It's the blink of a second, the quiet before collapse, the whisper before the roar. But that moment, that inch of time between sensing danger and responding to it, is everything. And here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. Most people wait for permission to save themselves. They wait for the authority to speak. They wait for someone else to scream. They wait for the situation to become undeniable. And by the time it is, it's already too late. This is not just about disasters. This is about how you live. You wait for signs before you act on your dream. You wait for proof before you speak your truth. You wait for security before you take the risk. And the waiting, that's the freeze. It's the same mechanism. What shows up as hesitation in the fire shows up as procrastination in your career. What looks like paralysis in a flood looks like indecision in your relationships. It's the same root. Fear of being wrong, fear of standing out, fear of acting alone. But what if you acted anyway? What if you made motion your new normal? What if your default wasn't wait and see, but move and lead? That's what leaders do in chaos. They don't wait for orders. They create order. They don't follow signals. They become the signal. Because the moment disaster begins, leadership is not a title. It's a choice. The same was true for the men who rebuilt after the Great Depression, not because someone told them to, but because they refused to freeze in the face of ruin. The same was true for the nurses during pandemics, standing alone in rooms of fear, choosing care over safety, choosing action over paralysis. You think that kind of strength is rare? It's not. It's practiced. It's built. And you build it long before the sirens wail. You build it when no one's watching. You build it when it's inconvenient. You build it when it would be easier to do nothing, because in that choice, between numbness and movement, you are programming your brain. Every time you choose action, you deepen the neural path. Every time you choose stillness with awareness, not fear, you build control. You don't need to be fearless, you need to be trained, because courage is not the absence of fear, it's the ability to move while afraid. That's what disaster reveals. It doesn't test your emotions, it tests your patterns, your habits, your reflexes, your programming. And if your programming is passive, your performance will be too. That's why greatness is built in practice, in repetition, in rehearsal, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. The same way a pilot practices engine failure 100 times. You must practice decisive thought, clear action, present awareness. Not when it's easy, but when it's foggy. Not when you have time, but when you have none. That's where it counts. When the alarm goes off and the room doesn't move, will you? When the plan falls apart and chaos fills the air, will you create the next one? When the lights go out and your path is unknown, will you still walk? That is your test, not your fear, not your freeze, your choice. Because the power isn't in what happens to you, it's in what you become when it does. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And that strength is the only thing that walks with you when everything else falls away." It's not luck. It's not noise. It's not gear. It's not circumstance. It's a mind forged in adversity, a spirit unshaken by uncertainty, a heart trained to act before fear takes the wheel. And that heart, it lives in you, right now, waiting. But you can't wait for the storm to awaken it. You must summon it before the flood. You must ignite it before the fire. You must call it out of the shadows and bring it into the center of your life, because the moment will come. And when it does, it won't send you an invitation. It will arrive unannounced. It will shake the walls. It will silence the noise. And then it will ask you, without words, are you frozen or are you forged? Because that's the question echoing through every disaster, every crisis, every pivotal second that separates survival from sorrow. Were you frozen or were you forged? Forged, not in comfort, not in theory, not in motivation quotes printed on posters, but in fire. In the fire of discipline, in the fire of self-mastery, in the fire of choosing to prepare when it would have been easier to pretend the danger didn't exist. See, most people wait until the fire is real to take it seriously. They wait for the earthquake to realize their foundation wasn't strong. They wait for the flood to understand they had no escape plan. They wait for the sirens to test whether their courage is real. But by then, it's no longer training, it's judgment. And disaster doesn't care about good intentions. It rewards the prepared. It spares the disciplined. It honors the fast and the focused. So you must live like every second is a rehearsal, not in fear, but in clarity. You don't need paranoia. You need precision. You don't need dread. You need design. Because a well-prepared life is not a life of anxiety. It's a life of freedom. And freedom doesn't come from safety. It comes from strength. The strength to choose action over inertia, purpose over panic, movement over stillness. That strength is what makes a single mother shield her children through a tornado. It's what made Viktor Frankl write about meaning while imprisoned in a Nazi camp. It's what allowed a plane to land on the Hudson River with 0 fatalities, because a pilot had rehearsed every failure before it happened. That strength lives in people who choose to rehearse when no one else will. And now, it lives in you, if you decide it does, not tomorrow. Now, because here's the truth, you don't rise to the moment, you fall to the level of your preparation. So if you want to rise, prepare higher, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, because when the moment comes, you won't get a second chance to think, only to trust the mind you've built. And what you've built is not just a set of facts. It's a philosophy, a belief system, a personal code that no storm can shake. That is the code of the forged, those who do not wait, those who do not freeze, those who move like a whisper just before the blast, clear, controlled, unstoppable. And when people ask how you kept calm in the chaos, how you stood while others crumbled, how you saw clearly while everything was smoke, you will not say, "I got lucky." You will say, "I was ready." And then you will walk forward, not because it's easy, but because you trained for it to be natural. Because in the end, it's not fear that kills. It's the lack of direction. It's not chaos that destroys. It's the absence of command. And it's not disaster that breaks you. It's whether you froze or moved. So move. When others pause, move. When the world screams, breathe. When the lights go out, stand taller. Because disaster is not the end. It's the invitation, an invitation to rise, to reveal, to remember who you really are when the world forgets its strength. You are not here to hesitate. You are not here to survive by accident. You are here to master yourself, so no force on earth can master you. So build the mind that never freezes. Build the soul that never waits. And when the storm comes, walk into it, not with fear, but with fire. Because now, you know, you don't have to be born fearless. You only have to be forged.